Hey everyone, welcome to episode 21 of the Darksliders podcast with Doug and Brad.
Hi.
We're going to jump right into some games that, Doug played this week, because I did not have a whole lot of time for video games this week, so we're going to talk through some games that Doug played. But the first game you played this week was Ziggurat. Did I say that
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. So I have no clue what this game is.
I barely knew what this game was when I bought it. I've started to get into a habit of just buying games that I've vaguely heard of and then being surprised by them because I read a lot about games, and so I want to buy games that like I really haven't read a whole lot about. And all I remember reading about Ziggurat was that it's kind of like Painkiller, which is my go-to insta buy.
I feel like if there was a marketing person out there for you, all they would have to say is, has some similarities to Painkiller, and you just buy it without
Oh
even
no!
looking at anything else.
Immediately. I love those games. I love like just stupid shooters where you have to like run around and shoot. And so the game. Okay, so what Ziggurat is for people who haven't heard of it, which I assume is most people. Ziggurat is a first-person shooter where you play as a sorcerer or a sorcerer's apprentice, and the idea is that you're going through this constantly changing labyrinth and killing all these monsters in order to join the sorcerer brotherhood. And the story is like nobody ever makes it out of this thing alive. Like a tenth of people ever actually complete the ziggurat or something like that. And it's a first-person shooter, and instead of guns, you actually only have spells. So you run around with a wand, and you have L2 and R2, and each wand, I guess, has a secondary and a primary fire. And usually the primary fire is just like a concentrated rapid fire blast, and then the secondary one is like a huge spread that kind of goes all over the place. I think that the gameplay itself is pretty good. I would say it definitely lives up to that Painkiller-esque, where there's just like a lot of enemies at once. You're shooting, you're running all over the place. But the problem I have with it, and one of the reasons I kind of like pain, I'm going to keep talking about Painkiller to compare it. Painkiller is it's a linear FPS where you keep going to like these different arenas, but every level is handcrafted and designed. And this is going to make Brad kind of lose his shit. So this is randomly generated levels.
Yeah, yep, that means I hate it.
Yeah.
If like Painkiller means you're going to instantly buy it, randomly generated means I'm never going to touch it.
Yeah.
Except No Man's Sky.
Yeah, that's like the definition, right? Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that when we actually buy it. But that is really funny how much you hate randomly generated, and you're like so excited for No Man's Sky. This game is basically set up like there's, I guess the best example I have is Binding of Isaac, where they are handcrafted arenas that are randomly tied together.
So it's just like a room connected to another room, and each room's designed very like specifically,
Yeah,
but it's random what order the rooms come in.
yeah. So which is kind of cool, but this is the thing I really don't like about randomly generated design in general, is that while you have unique designed arenas, it doesn't make sense how they tie together. So your whole like level design in general doesn't make sense. So that's why I was saying like the instant gameplay, like when you're shooting in an arena, is fun, but actually exploring the randomly generated environment is not fun at all, and I didn't enjoy it. So like, because what would happen almost every time is you find the boss room. So you're like, okay, I need to find the boss key. So you find the boss key like way on the other side of the level, and you have to sit there and just like walk back through a bunch of empty rooms you've already cleared in order to
That's
get to the
annoying.
boss. Yeah, and the other thing with like the randomly generated side of it is that your weapons and your skills. Oh, the thing that is kind of cool is that you level up like while you're inside it, kind of like Binding of Isaac. So you get like new weapons, new skills. Sometimes like you kill an enemy, you'll get health back, etc. So that's kind of fun. But I beat the game on my third try. Like I don't think they I don't think the game plans on you like beating it really quickly, but I got just really lucky on a roll. I got some sort of instant level up thing. So I got to like level 20 before I beat the game, which is really high. It's kind of hard. It's if you don't know what the levels are, but I got to like the max level like immediately or really quickly and just destroyed everything and beat the final boss with no problem. And it's like you beat the game, and then the credits rolled. It's like,
So this
oh
is so this is one of those games like Binding of Isaac where it's like it takes an hour or two to play through the whole thing, but it's different, quote unquote, every time.
yeah, but those randomly generated games, they don't feel different because you're still going to the same arenas. They're just in different order, which isn't it's not
Yeah.
that's not interesting to me. It's like if the arenas themselves were a little bit randomly generated, maybe that'd be a little bit more interesting. But it's like, oh, okay, I've seen this arena before. Okay, there's like slightly different creatures, but it's the same arena, but this time it's the left instead of the right. Like that's not intriguing. That's not something to explore. It's just
Yeah.
kind of like I actually don't even understand why they did that and why they didn't just have like linear levels. I think it's just to kind of artificially extend the life of your game.
Well, I feel like if you've got an hour or two long game, I feel like that's not going to go over too well with a lot of people. But if it's an hour or two long, randomly generated, and there's infinite possibilities or whatever, I feel like that's just a better excuse for your game to be really short and just go, oh, well, you're meant to play it multiple times so you see everything in different order.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You're just seeing things in different. It's not like you're seeing new things.
Yeah.
You're just seeing things in different order, which I don't know. I sound kind of down on this game, and I kind of am. But well, okay, the things I do like, I really like the art style. It's kind of fun. It's like a really cartoony, demonic. It's kind of reminds me of like classic Doom, where there's like these Doom monsters, but they had sort of like really cartoony caricature stuff, and they're all inspired by vegetables for some reason. So every enemy you fight is like a demonic vegetable. So they have like these creepy carrots that run at you. They have these giant mushrooms that shoot spells at you.
So, do they actually look like vegetables? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
it
I mean,
just
they
like
look
a
like
carrot with legs?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like they're like demonic vegetables.
That's messed up.
But some of them are demonic vegetables. Not all of them. Some of them are like generic skeletons and stuff. So I don't quite understand like what the vegetable thing is, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun character design. It's really colorful, which I like. Like all your spells, like they either shoot like red sparks or purple sparks or green sparks. Um, so I had fun with the time I had, and I was on sale for like I don't know $5. So to me, was it worth the $5 to play around for a day? Yeah, yeah, sure, it was worth the $5 to play around for the day. Is this something I'd buy at full price? Probably not. I would be really intrigued to see what they go with next. If they kind of improve the gameplay and kind of really tone down the randomly generated, or shoot it up, like make it way more randomly generated with a lot more different
Yeah.
things in play instead of just being different arenas, different spots, and like slightly different weapons. Then yeah, I'll be excited for Ziggurat too. But I don't know. I like this game. I don't think I think it has a lot of problems that could be fixed with a future sequel.
So more just like, okay, kind of your first run through with this, just to kind of get a feel for it. Let's see what you can do to kind of perfect it and turn this kind of formula into something really cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I played like 20 hours of Binding of Isaac, and I played like 3 hours of this, and they're the same game. It doesn't have that hook, and I don't know what that hook is in Binding of Isaac. Oh, Binding of Isaac had like thousands of weapons or something like that. I think that's what it is. If it just had more of that randomly generated stuff, then I think it'd be a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with randomly generated is there's I don't know, and I don't like it overall, but I feel like you have to have a lot of content for it to really, like you said, have that hook. Because if you
Yeah,
see everything the first time through, then the randomly generated doesn't mean anything.
that's true. Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's absolutely true. Because I felt like I was kind of going through the same environments, the same enemies. There's just like looks slightly different, but yeah, this doesn't actually have like a huge enemy list either.
Yeah, but like Binding of Isaac, you said you put 20 hours into. I know that game
Mhm.
had tons of stuff where you could probably play through it 3 or 4 times and not see everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like a lot of your, especially with Binding of Isaac, your weapons they would kind of like stack on top of each other and have different
Yep.
properties if you had different weapons equipped and things like that. But again, this is like somebody's like first game, and it's a 3D game and not a 2D game, so it's a lot harder to create like unique assets and things like that. So I understand that. I yeah, I'm excited for Ziggurat 2. I just don't know if I would tell people to immediately go and buy Ziggurat 1. But if you like those sort of Binding of Isaac games with randomly generated stuff, and if you had fun with Painkiller, Bulletstorm, or those other really crazy for Serious Sam like games, then yeah, I would say give it a buy for like $5.
Nice. So the other game I know you played a lot this week, which I'm actually really interested in, and I
Hmm.
almost bought once or twice, but just didn't really have any time this week, was the Trials Awesome Max Level Pack DLC, or I don't remember exactly how those words went in what order, but which is the Crazy Unicorn DLC that they showed off at E3 that came out
Hmm.
just this past week. So how did that go? Like, is there anything different about this?
Well, okay, so what the DLC pack is, it's six, or I'd say eight levels of the crazy unicorn levels, and then there's 22 like normal trials levels, and then I think there's like five multiplayer maps, and then there's some extra costumes or stuff. So I'll talk about I guess the thing to start about this because people are I think most interested in that like crazy cat unicorn DLC, which is like eight levels total, and it's sort of an adventure thing where you start as a trials guy and you sneak into a secret laboratory and you get blueprints for the ultimate rider character, and the ultimate rider character is apparently like a cat riding a unicorn, with a golden gun. It sounds really fun in theory, and it is kind of fun, but it's not the it's by far like the worst part of the DLC is all those levels. I guess first off, the horse just isn't fun to play as.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not as good as a bike. I at first I was like, oh, this is kind of fun and unique, but then after a while, it's like, I just rather have a bike. I would just rather have a bike.
Does it control differently, or is it like how different is it playing as the unicorn versus playing as like the normal bike?
It plays almost exactly the same. It just feels like a worse bike. You know how sometimes you're playing a level, you're like, oh, I just don't have the right bike for this.
Oh yeah.
That's what it feels like the entire time.
Oh, ew.
And it's really easy to tip over, and it just feels a little bit different. It still feels like it feels like riding a horse with motorcycle controls. That's about as good as it feels. And the DLC for whatever reason, I guess I don't like to complain about like technical stuff because I don't really know technical stuff that well, especially when it comes to games and graphics and things like that. But there's a lot of levels where you're sort of like warping into new different environments, which is kind of cool. You like one of the levels, I think the second level is you actually warp through all the environments you'll go through in a single level. So like you'll be in space, you'll be in Mars, you'll be in like a fantasy land. But what happens is like every time it switches over, instead of being like an instant thing, it does this thing where it like loads in the new level and like all the textures sort of like pop in and there's this weird drop in frames per second and like the detail's really low for a second and then it all loads in. But it feels really weird because like Trials is so moment to moment.
Yeah.
That like 2 or 3 moments, like you're not really sure how your character's turned because when they did this warp, it's like, okay, my character turned right. And yeah, it doesn't feel very good. I would say honestly, those 8 levels were the most disappointing part. I will say though, it's kind of fun. It kind of reminded me of a mod. That's what it felt like through and through. It felt like a mod.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like if you played Half-Life 2 mods or basically any story mod, and it feels like the base game, but just a little bit jankier. But it's a little more silly.
Yeah.
So if you can deal with like the silliness and jankiness of it, then yeah, those are okay. They're really silly. Oh, one disappointing thing: the cat has a gun, which is cool, but you never use it. Like you never shoot anything.
But there's like there's a button mapped to shoot the gun.
No. The cat just has a gun. He has like a
just
golden
like in the
Desert
character
Eagle.
model.
Yes, the character model has a golden Desert Eagle, and you never shoot anything.
That seems kind of dumb.
It was very dumb. I was kind of disappointed. I was mad at myself for being mad about that because I was like, shooting would probably be a really bad idea in a Trials game anyway.
Just to add one more thing to try and focus on.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're gonna put it in your character model, you might as well use it.
Yeah.
So I sound really down on this DLC, which actually isn't true at all because the other 22 levels are probably the best Trials levels I've ever played.
Really?
Like I played all the DLC, I played all the main game.
But you haven't
and
played
these are the
HD
best
or
levels.
Evolution.
Huh?
You haven't played HD or Evolution. Though,
No, I haven't played HD or Evolution. Okay, that's what I'm saying. These are
the best that you've played from the one game in the series that you've played. But anyway, go on.
Well, okay, no. Well, I mean, I've played like 100 levels of Trials.
Yeah,
I would say these 22 levels are like the top 22 levels in the game. And the thing that I really like is the DLC before it. I think I talked about this on the previous podcast. Is the DLC before it was kind of it kind of got crazier and crazier. Yeah. And they could do a lot of stuff for the DLC. And this is kind of like a continuation of that. But because this time they don't actually have... The other DLCs they each had their own theme. Like one was Robot Factory, so you had like Robot Factory theme levels. Or there was one that was Atlantis, so you had Atlantis theme levels. But this one doesn't really have a theme. It has nothing to do with the Awesome Max or anything like that. So they can do whatever they want. So there's like a Jurassic Park level. It's kind of like Jurassic Park. There's a level that's there's a UFO level. Then there's one... which is really surprising and completely random, inspired by Alan Wake.
I love Alan Wake.
Yeah, so I don't know how they got away with this, and it's really strange that it's even in there, because I think it's called like Sleepy Falls or Sleepy Creek or something like that. Yeah. And I think, which is a play on Alan Wake and what the town is called like Bright Falls or something like that. So it's like a kind of combination.
Yeah. So yeah. I feel like that almost sounds like more like the level creator, where you just go in and there's just random levels kind of based around random things, but they're actually the developer actually making those.
Yeah, exactly. And then so like half the levels are developer created and the other half are community created. And at first it's like, oh, well, if they're community created, why can't we just download them for free because they're community created? But they're really, really, really well done. The community created ones don't have any new assets. so they use reuse assets from the DLC. While the Red Links levels, the creators of Trials, they all have like unique,
Assets in them.
yeah, unique art and stuff. But the way that the community like remixed a lot of these assets was really really cool. They have a level that kind of looks like Bloodborne with like these like really weird gothic castles and weird like spells and things like
Yeah.
that. They're really 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 creative levels.
See, have you played any of like the free community created stuff at all? Have you
I
gone into
played a
any of that?
little bit, but all they were was like extreme difficulty,
Yeah, you have
and
to.
then they were just
I think it's kind of like what you said with Little Big Planet, where you really have to look around to get the good stuff. But because
yeah.
there is some really cool stuff in there, and I'd be curious now if those are actually available for free through like the community download. If they just picked like some of their like top 11 tracks or something.
I would be really disappointed if that's the case. I was actually thinking about that as I was playing it. I don't think they are because there's definitely a certain extra level of
Detail.
effort
Yeah.
that from what I mean I'm just I mean again I didn't really play the community levels that much, but I did play like Little Big Planet levels where it's like the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
Like there's a like it's not only the good levels, the really really good looking levels, and they do a lot of cool stuff, creative stuff with the assets where it's like one you're inside a computer, but okay, there's no computer asset, so how the heck did they do that kind of thing? I see now that you say that, that's what makes me hesitant because I these are the best levels in Trials, and I think the DLC is worth it just for those 22 levels. Do you want to spend $10 for 22 levels? Is the question.
Yeah. And that's
I would say,
always been my hesitancy with the Trials DLC anyway. Is there are literally thousands of free levels, so why am I paying for 10 more? Has always been
well,
my holdup on getting any DLC for Trials.
well, what you're paying for is you're paying for like unique asset levels that are created by the team
Yeah.
who create the engine for it. So like you're going to get high quality, you're immediately going to get a high quality track, and then you're going to get new art assets as well, and you're getting it from a professional who like created the game from the ground up.
I guess
So
that's
to
true.
me, that is enough. That is enough for it. Then do it's kind of like why would you get an expansion pack for a PC game when you can just play an infinite amount of mods?
Fair point, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a certain amount of quality that comes along with it. So this is actually like my favorite DLC pack, which is really weird considering I didn't like the advertised part of it at all.
Which is weird, because I don't feel like in the advertisement, I don't remember there ever being any mention of just normal straight tracks. Like, everything was so focused on that cat unicorn thing. And
Yeah.
just to hear that that's the worst part, and that's not even like, I mean, that's, what'd you say, 8 levels and there's 22 other ones, so that's not even a quarter of, or no, more
Hmm.
than, I can't do math right now. Anyway, like, that's like 25%-ish of this DLC. That just seems weird to me that that's the big advertised part.
Yeah, I think it's the big advertised part because it's a lot easier to advertise a cat on a unicorn as being, oh my god, look, there's a cat on a unicorn, as opposed to, okay, these are just really good trials levels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh well, we already have really good trials levels. Why would we want that? Oh, but there's a cat and a unicorn. Now I want it.
What?
Yeah, I just think it was a way to um, advertise this DLC. It was basically, I think it was actually kind of like a trick. It's like, okay, we got these really really good levels, but nobody's gonna buy it because nobody bought our other DLC. So how do we make this one unique while still getting, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was kind of. I think they were being a little disingenuous almost in order to get people to buy the really 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 good trials levels.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like the cat and the unicorn levels like are like terrible. Like they're just I just didn't like them as much as the normal trials levels. And they are pretty creative though, and like you do go to some really unique environments. They're just not nearly as good as the other 22 levels. They're just incredible, all of them.
Yeah. So moving on here, we did this. I think the first time we did this was the last episode, but something that we thought would be just kind of interesting to have more of a conversation about game mechanics and things like that, as opposed to always just going over games that we're playing or news or anything. So what we wanted to kind of talk about this time a little bit was kind of that open world feel of games that aren't really open world. And the biggest example of this, and I honestly think Doug just came up with this as an excuse to talk more about this game, but
I have other examples. Let's just be clear.
But the kind of the thinking here is a game like Bloodborne. Is Bloodborne actually an open world game? Because Bloodborne definitely has a very linear path that you go down,
Mm-hmm.
but it's advertised as an open world, and you can kind of, to a point, go where you want. I mean, I obviously didn't play a ton of Bloodborne, as we've discussed many times.
Well, that's
but...
okay. That's what I'm saying. I think a better example of this would be Arkham Asylum. I'm not even saying Arkham City. I'm saying like Arkham Asylum, where Arkham Asylum has, because this is an easy one we can both talk about, where Arkham Asylum has a clear linear path, but then there's a part where it like opens up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's not an open world game, but it's an open world kinda.
Yeah,
And
so
yeah,
what differentiates an open world versus an open world kind of? Because now that we're talking about this, I'm thinking like Grand Theft Auto is an open world game,
yeah,
but Grand Theft Auto has set mission order that you have to go on. You can't jump. You know what I mean?
yeah. What I mean, I don't mean it in that regard. There's linear level design versus like what you're thinking is like linear storytelling. Like I think an open like pretty much every open world game has linear storytelling
Hmm.
in which you would do like one mission A, mission B, mission C. So that's like to me that's linear storytelling. What I'm talking about is the level design itself. I think the best way to describe this is like Metroidvania, but even Metroidvania isn't a good way to describe these kind of this sort of like not new breed of games, but yeah, I would say like a new breed of games where they're not open enough to be called open world, and they're certainly not linear enough to be called like something like Uncharted. Like Uncharted, I think would be like the penultimatum, like really good way to do a linear game.
Yeah.
But something like Dark Souls or Bloodborne or Arkham Asylum doesn't really meet that criteria. And then we also have a word like Metroidvania, which is actually what I'm describing like on a 2D plane. But we don't actually have like a word to describe this on a in a 3D world. And I think we need to figure out like a better nomenclature to describe these games instead of saying like putting on the box like it's an open world game.
But you only have really one direction you can travel in. Because now that I'm thinking about it, Bloodborne, you really are always traveling forward.
Yeah, no,
At
yeah,
least,
exactly.
again, to the point that I got to, is I never felt like I had to go. Once I was through an area, I never had a reason to go back there. I had the ability to go back there, but
Yeah.
I didn't need to.
Yeah, and I actually really really like that. I actually love that sort of design. I'll even say when I'm saying this, I'm saying Arkham Asylum as well. So I'm not just like saying I love Bloodborne over and over again, even though I do. I think it takes like the best of both worlds. Where actually I think actually a good way it compares would be Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, or Arkham Asylum and Arkham Knight, where Arkham Knight is an open world game. It's really open. You can just like come in on random bad guys and stuff like that. But the level design doesn't feel nearly as good. It doesn't feel nearly as tight as something like Arkham Asylum. And I think this is even an issue in Arkham City. Like I'm sure you played Arkham City. Which one do you like better, Arkham City or Arkham Asylum?
Um, I think I'd probably say Arkham City. I got more into that game. I think
Mm-hmm.
just because it was really an open world, and I always like the ability to kind of do whatever I want whenever I want.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, like we kind of talked about, Arkham Knight kind of was always pushing you in a direction. I mean, I've been playing Dragon Age,
Yeah.
and my first thing is normally, okay, step one, explore everywhere I can possibly go.
Mm-hmm.
Step two, which of these quests sounds the most interesting? Is it the main storyline? Then I'll jump down that. If it's not, then forget that. I'm going to go do this other thing that's actually interesting to me. So I just always like that ability to be able to kind of pick what I'm going to do.
Yeah, but do you feel like you need a huge open world in order to do that? Because when I was thinking of actually when I asked the question of Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, I realized I actually like Arkham City better. And what I meant to ask you is, do you like Arkham Asylum or Arkham Knight? Where Arkham Knight is like super open world, and Arkham City is open world, but it's really dense.
I still have not played Arkham
Well,
Knight.
no, I understand. No, I know that. I know that. But I'm
That's
saying,
fine.
I'm saying Arkham City, while it was an open world game, was not a large open world game by any means.
Oh, you're talking like world size. Like, do I need something that's like miles and miles across? Like, I mean, what is
Yeah.
like The Witcher 3 that has like the biggest map in the history of maps, or just a self-contained city?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it doesn't really either way. I mean, I don't know. I don't really necessarily have a preference. I feel like as long as it's done well enough that there's stuff to do in it. You know what I mean? Like, so some games
Yeah.
I feel like just get so big and there's areas that there's just nothing in there. There's just area to be area.
Yeah.
And I feel like at times Fallout and some of the Elder Scroll games have gotten to that point where it's like, oh yeah, there's this awesome mountain range that you can go walk through, and in there's like a guy who's just like, hey, can you find my cow or whatever
Yeah,
random little
exactly.
thing.
That's what I don't. That's what I'm starting to not like about. I think that's kind of a problem with those huge open world games in general. It's like they're so big, and that's when you start getting those repetitive tasks because you
Yeah,
just need because we talked about this collecting thing. Like you just need a repetitive task that you can start filling in the environment with.
hmm we
So
made this cool looking area. We have to have something for you to do in it. So here's your boring little thing to do in it, so you can look at all the pretty mountains or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Well, while I'd much rather have something like Arkham Asylum, or I would say Arkham City is probably the best example of like the best of both worlds, where you have an open world hub, I guess, and
Yeah,
then you have like these linear levels, and you also have like linear storytelling. And while there's not a whole lot to do like submissions, it still feels, it makes it feel like a world, like you are, this is actually like a city.
yeah,
uh, so it kind of gets that sense of place you get with those large open worlds, but then it also doesn't have that issue of having super repetitive tasks that are used to fill open worlds.
yeah. And I think that's just. I almost sometimes think that's more a problem of like quest creation and who's actually writing out the quest. Because there's
Mhm.
ways that you can take that open world and you can make there be cool stuff to do in all of these areas. But I just feel like at some point, I mean, in developing these games, you don't have, in a lot of cases, these games are churned out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Not everyone. I mean, there are developers who take, the 4 or 5 years to really go and hone in on stuff. But a lot of these games, it's like, okay, you've got 2 years. You don't necessarily have time to sit here and go, okay, I have to sit here and come up with a really unique quest for there to be a reason for this mountain range to be here.
Yeah,
It's much
exactly.
quicker. It's much easier to just go, okay, you go to the mountain range, put a cabin there. In the cabin, somebody's disappeared. They left a note that said they went here. Go find them.
Yeah, but it's just like copy the code over from whatever quest we have. That's the go
Exactly.
find the stuff quest.
Exactly. And I can't think of a good example of a game that's done it, but there are ways to have those huge areas and have unique stuff to do in them. And I think it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of how many people are
Yeah.
actually going to see that in the end product. You know what I mean? A game like, again, I've been playing Dragon Age. Looking at Dragon Age Inquisition, there's so many quests that if you really sit down and think about how many people are going to do each little tiny side quest,
Hmm.
as a matter of resources, does it make sense to fill those quests with really, really cool, really engaging things when only maybe 10% of your audience is ever even going to see that?
Yeah. So with that point made, why do you want to see No Man's Sky?
Because I get to be in a spaceship and go wherever I want, and I just get to see cool planets, and it's in space. It has nothing to do with anything. If that game was anything other than, here's a cool spaceship, just go explore. It's literally like, in my mind, Star Trek, the video game. Just go
But
explore and find cool stuff, because that's all Star Trek was, but now I get to do it myself.
but are you worried about that like sort of repetition of tasks like you were saying like with open world? Like this is literally the biggest open world ever. like
But No
but
Man's Sky is like, but they are straightforward with it. Like, and we talked about this before. In my mind, there is nothing to do in No Man's Sky.
yeah.
In my mind, that game is just like, here's a big empty space. There is no one else in it. Look around.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to think, what's that game? Proteus, right? Where you're just walking around,
So
but just on a
you'd almost rather
massive
there be
scale.
like nothing but that mountain range there, as opposed to like that mountain range now being ruined by a stupid quest. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm not.
if you tell me there is like this really cool mountain range, and you know what, there's going to be unique creatures in it, and there's going to be some really cool like design work in it, go wander through. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? That to me, and I think it would have to be like a setting that I'm interesting. Like if Dragon Age was just like, oh yeah, there's this really pretty forest over here, and the forest has a couple cool animals. No way in hell I would ever go to that forest. And again, I think it just comes to a level of interest. And I think this is why they put those quests there, and they're not quests that are great, is because what percent of your audience is actually going to be interested?
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? No Man's Sky has the randomly generated impact of it, where it's just, you know what? You're just going to see some random shit, and who knows if the shit's going to be good or not, but it's going to be there, and you can see it if you want.
yeah,
Whereas, a game like Dragon Age is like, no, we specifically designed this, but if you want to go look at it, you can. We'll give you something to do there. It's not going to be great, but there'll be something
yeah.
to do there. But really go
I
look
feel
at
like
it.
the something to do there almost ruins it. Like if it was just a like if it was just like a cavern that had unique creatures in it, to me that would be enough to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I think, in my mind, I'm thinking like Dragon Age so far, there's like 4 animals that I've run into in like the 2 or 3 like major areas I've explored. So it's like,
Seriously?
I mean,
Uh,
there's like different like character types and things like that, but there's like a ram, a fox looking thing, some kind of wild pig.
oh, that's a bummer. Actually, the one of the reasons I was like considering buying the game is I thought it had like really cool creatures.
Well, again, I've only looked through like 2 or 3 of the worlds. I'm still only like maybe 10 hours into it, so I'm still not super far, but
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like these kind of repetitive side quest stuff, I think they kind of sour your world more
And
than them just not being there at all.
I think that's where a game like Bloodborne and Arkham Asylum come in, is that yeah, they have these really cool worlds, and yeah, you can kind of go wherever you want, and you can look at that. I could go back and look at a pretty building in Bloodborne as many times as I want,
Yeah.
and there's not going to be somebody standing outside the building going, "Did you find my sheep yet?" You know what I mean? And every time I walk past that building, I go, "Ooh, this is a really cool like landscape shot. Did you find my sheep yet?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like devs. I think there's just like just kind of endemic of the just people need something to do in games. Like, I mean, think about like the crap that No Man's Sky is getting. Like, they have to keep explaining what you do in this game. But what you're
Yeah,
saying, like, I agree with you. Is like, it doesn't matter. Like in Journey, you walk. Like that's what you
yeah,
do in Journey. You walk and you fly around. Like that's it. And I feel like I think, but at the same time, I think it's really hard to do that design while keeping it interesting. And it's just much safer to put something there that somebody will be slightly disappointed in than somebody being bored with your game.
yeah. And I think that's true. And I think that gets into what you talked about, like when we talked about Shadows of Mordor last week. He was like, I don't know, it's elves and dwarves and whatever. That's pretty much a write off for me. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think if it's a setting that you're invested in, you're totally fine not doing anything. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think if you had a game like Dragon Age or even like Elder Scrolls, where it's just this fairly typical fantasy landscape, and they're like, oh yeah, you can just wander around through it.
Hmm.
Nobody's gonna buy that because we've all seen that done dozens of times at this point.
Yeah.
And nobody is interested in, oh yeah, I'm going to see another fantasy world that's probably going to have the basic same, structure as every other fantasy world.
Yeah.
But with a game like Journey, they created a unique world and they created things that were unique to it. No Man's Sky, I think
Yeah.
if we'd seen, the Mass Effect formula copied 10 times over at this point,
Yeah.
people wouldn't be interested in No Man's Sky. But there's this thing about, you know what, we haven't seen very many like space exploration games where you can go to all these planets, you can do this.
Yeah.
Other than Mass Effect, I'm really struggling to come up with an idea or another game that's done that recently.
That's true. So you think that it's that those quests are kind of being used as a crutch if you don't have an environment that you think people would be just excited enough to be in and just be okay with just being in an environment and that's the experience.
Yeah, because like that's with Bloodborne. Bloodborne has a very unique setting to it, and
Hmm.
people are fine just wandering around through it because you've never seen this type of setting before, or
Yeah.
not never, but rarely.
Yeah,
And
and
even like
like the dialogue they give you is like just like little sentences. If you meet a character, you get like 5 sentences, like
yeah,
that's it.
and even a game like Fallout, I mean, post-apocalyptic has been done to hell, but there's not a whole lot of games that just let you go freely explore it and see what's out there.
Yeah, that's
You know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's why Fallout to me holds my interest a bit more than like Skyrim because it's a setting that I haven't been in. And yeah, there's maybe not a lot to do in the world and there's giant stretches of just like desert,
Hmm.
but it's interesting what you get to on the other side of that desert even without somebody standing there going like, "Oh man, I lost my bottle caps."
Yeah, actually, this is kind of those things. This is like getting totally off topic. We don't have a lot of news, so I guess we can keep talking about it. But
This
this
is
is
a
like
down week. That's
no, this is one of those things that I don't know how to put this in a word, but like the importance of boredom in a game, where like the fact that you haven't had something to do in a long time makes it very exciting when there is something to do. Shadow
yeah.
of the Colossus is probably like the best example of this. I know you haven't played a whole lot, but you've played enough to understand that like between the Colossus battles, there's nothing.
Yeah,
Like you just
you ride a horse in a direction.
yeah, you ride a horse and you kind of you don't really explore the environment, but you kind of like you just soak in the whole fact of like you going there. Kind of you soak in it's a journey. You're traveling. You're like that's the experience. And then when you get to that boss battle is so much more amazing because you've been not bored, but you just haven't been like as engaged in the game. So
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing with that Bloodborne and Dark Souls does really well. It's because there's not many characters around. So when you finally do meet a character, like, oh wow, this is strange, this is weird. What is this character doing here? But with like with like we were saying, Dragon Age, like you just have NPCs and just everybody all over the place. So it's not nearly as meaningful anymore.
Mhm.
So like when you give all these people all these side quests and stuff, they're no longer meaningful.
Yeah, which is weird to me because a big thing I think with games like Dragon Age is they have all the people to make the world feel, quote unquote alive and like it's a
Hmm.
living real world. But again, I don't particularly care for Bloodborne, but to me that world feels much more alive
Yeah,
than
even
like
though
a game
everybody's
like Dragon
literally
Age.
dead in
Yeah,
it.
literally. But you know what I mean? But just there's so much going on in it, and I'm so much more engaged into what's actually going on with this, and I'm more curious about the world. Whereas Dragon Age is like, Yep, the religious people don't like them. Oh, yep, Templars and Mages. I know how this story goes down. Oh, dragon. Yep, okay. And I think it just goes back to that engaging setting idea.
Yeah. I also feel that also has to do with a lot of like your stats are showing. Like if you can see if you see a quest as just being a way to like check off a checkbox and you don't see it as a person in need, then you don't care. And then
Yeah,
it just feels like a game. Like and it kind of like pulls you out of that world. Well, I think in conclusion to all this, less is more.
yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think open world is good, but having stuff that's meaningful, and even if that means scaling down your open world, I don't think is necessarily bad. And I think games that have that Bloodborne feel, where it's got that kind of middle ground, are succeeding because you mentioned the boredom factor a couple times, and I think those games really quickly eliminate that boredom factor because everything's so well planned out.
Yeah, it's well paced, but I'm saying like you have just longer spaces in between interactions of things happening, and I think that's really I think that's a really good idea. I think it's really bold for a developer to do that and hard to do.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so anyway, moving on to some news here, moving away from that, but sticking with developers kind of doing different things. So Deep Silver, who's the company who's behind all the Dead Island games, I know they've got a couple other bigger name franchises that I can't think of off the top of my head, but they dropped one of their developers, and I believe it's Jaeger, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I would say Jaeger. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, that was what I was going to go with, but I don't know. But anyway, they have been working on Dead Island 2 for a couple years now, I feel like.
Yeah,
I'm
like
not
two
sure
or three, I think.
Yeah, a decent amount of time, but they just dropped them this
Mhm.
week and just were like, nope, they're gone. The only game that I'm super familiar with from them is Spec Ops: The Line, which I absolutely love,
Yeah.
which is a really unique shooter that came out probably just before they started Dead Island 2. But
Hmm.
a couple weird things with this. Dead Island 2 is still in development. It's not done yet. So this is a game in
Yeah.
the middle of development. Their developer gets dropped. So they're no longer working on it, but Deep Silver still plans on putting out Dead Island 2 in some capacity at some point.
Hmm.
And then kind of along with this, and maybe this led to something, because I don't think there's really a whole big statement as to why this all went down, but Dead Island 2 is actually delayed for quality concerns. I think it was about a year ago. Because I think it was already supposed to have come out, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be this spring, whatever that means.
Yeah. So, I don't know. And this is kind of, I don't feel like you read about this too much where, like, that kind of like, I mean, obviously a whole different level, but this would be like EA coming out and saying, like, oh yeah, we just decided to let BioWare go.
Yeah.
Obviously
Well,
a much different
yeah, no
level,
shit.
but
Dude, this would be a much bigger story if BioWare
oh
was
well,
dropped by somebody. I think BioWare would have to drop themselves. No, BioWare works for EA, right?
yeah, they do. Yep,
Okay.
EA bought them out.
Yeah. Well, I think this news isn't totally surprising because you said Spec Ops: The Line is a unique shooter.
I loved Spec Ops: The
Why?
Line.
Okay, why do you like Spec Ops: The Line?
The story.
Okay, so the writer of that story left the company after Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh, well, that makes much more sense then.
Okay,
Yeah,
but okay, so now you're left with okay, so what do they have to fall back on? So how'd you like the gameplay of Spec Ops?
it was average.
Okay, so now you get a team who does they do average gameplay. That's being cruel, but they made a solid shooter. Let's say that they made a
Yeah,
solid shooter. But now you're asking
they
them to
made
do
they made a middle of the road shooter that was incredibly elevated because of its unique story.
yes. So now you've removed that story and you've told them to make an open world zombie game. And I don't know what they were expecting. I mean, I just don't think the team was like prepared for that. Like they did a linear military shooter, and now you're asking them to do an open world, expansive zombie game with a fun tone. Like,
And if you played Spec Ops: The Line, the last thing that game had was a fun tone.
yeah. So what I'm thinking is like I think this is more a problem on Deep. This is I think they're both at fault. I think Deep Silver should have realized that this team isn't really prepared to do this sort of game, and then Jaeger
Yeah.
should have been we're probably not the team that should be doing this game.
Yeah, and I'm sure from like Jaeger's standpoint, coming from a game like Spec Ops: The Line, that was kind of like a smaller game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a Spec Ops kind of franchise, more so to speak, but I think if somebody put that in front of him and was like, okay, you get to do the next Dead Island, which 3 or 4 years ago was huge,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have been a huge thing. I don't think they could have turned that down. But I do think Deep Silver, I think, needed to do a little bit more thought before they kind of set this up for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think another big issue too is what was that? Dying Light came out, which was actually by
Yes.
the Dead Island devs. And well, I haven't played it, but I've heard that like people who like Dead Island really like Dying Light because it's
Well,
basically Dead Island 2.
and one point with that is Deep Silver had previously dropped, I believe that was Techland, right?
Yeah.
They previously dropped them, so Deep Silver had no connection with Dying Light, which was made by the guys who did Dead Island 1.
Yeah, so basically like another company did Dead Island 2, but better.
Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, and that team was stuck with like yeah, they didn't have any I'm sure they got like some design documents in them, but they're like make Dead Island 2. By the way, the guys who worked on Dead Island 1, you'll have no contact with. Like
And they will be directly competing against you.
yeah, yeah. Good luck.
And Dying Light came out, what, like 6 months ago now, which would have been right around the time frame that this game was originally supposed to be released.
yeah. Well, no. This game was supposed to come out in spring. This game was supposed to come out like 2 or 3 months ago, but like it was supposed to come out after Dying Light, basically.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, same window, more or less.
yeah.
I don't know. I
It's
feel
like,
like
by the way, that team also has a much bigger budget than you'll ever have.
yeah. I don't know. I just feel like the whole Dead Island series as a whole has just always been this like weird up and down, like who knows what the hell is going on with this franchise.
It just felt like a very I know you don't like numbers, but a very 7 like C plus sort of
Yeah.
game series.
Yeah,
Where
because I mean, like the
yeah.
first one got so much crap for just like it's very like overly emotional trailer that you know what I mean. That started
Mhm.
out like that was why that game was so hyped was because of the original trailer.
Mhm.
And the game didn't really reflect that tone.
At
Then you had
all, from what I understand.
Yeah, and then you had Dead Island Riptide, which I think was a fairly decent like kind of expansion pack esque 1.5 release.
hmm
And then you have whatever the hell Escape Dead Island was that came out last year.
Yeah, and then they also did a MOBA as well.
And then you've got Dead Island 2 now, like 4 games later. Like I don't know,
Yeah,
this whole franchise just seems like nobody really knows what to do with this thing.
yeah, and I think Dying Light. This game's not going to be as good as Dying Light. I don't think Dying Light was like amazing. Like people who play Dying Light, like yeah, it's pretty good. It has a lot of problems though.
Yeah,
But I feel like this game's gonna be like it's not very good and has a lot of problems. Like
yeah. But
yeah,
I'm just curious to see what ends up happening with Dead Island 2 now, because I mean, who knows where they were in development with it, and I mean, who knows who's taking over it, and then you've got to go with the whole thing of does this new team have the same vision as the old team? You know what I mean?
yeah.
So
And they've
I
got
mean,
a
this
bunch of
probably pushes
assets
that
sitting
game
around
out.
too. Like oh, sorry,
Yeah,
what are you saying?
yeah. I mean, this probably pushes this game out at least another year or two. So who knows when this is even going to come out at this point?
Yeah, and they're willing to put in like another few $1 million. Like they've already got $1 million worth of assets sitting there, and like how many of those can they actually take over to the next team? Like, who knows? Like that's
Yeah,
not like without somebody translating for them.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a gigantic mess right now.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like on everybody's fault. I don't think Silver is the bad guy, and I don't think Jaeger is the bad guy. I think it's just probably just a really bad business decision.
Yeah. Somebody put up a contract and somebody said yes without thinking things through.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of another game that's in development that a lot of people are pumped for is Shenmue 3, or in development might be too early of a term. I don't really know where that's at, but that Kickstarter wrapped up just a day or two ago at $6.3 million,
Yeah.
making it the most funded video game project ever on Kickstarter, just passing Bloodstained, which was just finished up like 2 weeks ago. So
hmm
I think between those two games, it kind of shows this new, almost like really powerful funding source for some of these developers. And I don't really know what 6.3 million is going to look like for Shenmue 3, or if they're getting money from somewhere else. And we kind
Oh,
of talked about
if
this
no,
before.
they are.
Yeah.
Like this budget is like this $6 million is probably like I think they already said like Sony's probably ponying up at least 50 million.
Yeah, I think I know they're a lot more than this.
Yeah, but I also I'm trying to dance around it because I know you're going to get crazy about it and we don't know a whole lot about it. But to me, I can understand why people are like, well, why do we have to fund this if Sony's funding it?
Yeah,
And I can understand that, but at the same time, I think that the people who put the $6.3 million, I think because these are hardcore fans, many of them are aware that yes, Sony is probably doing that, but it's worth it for me to buy these trinkets and whatever that come with $100 or $200. Like, oh, I get a signed thing from the guy who made Shenmue 3. Okay, that's kind of cool. That's worth to me $200. Or I get a Steelbook edition. Okay, that's worth $100 to me. I think people are at this point anyway are well aware that this is only a very small percentage of the budget. I can see you cringing. I know you're just ready to get mad.
So, okay, so here's my thing. Yes, I agree with that. But at this point, it's come out basically, and one of the stretch goals was at 10 million, this game can be a truly open world game.
That is crazy. That is really strange.
Now, if follow me here. Now, if Sony's funding most of this, and you're like, oh yeah, they're putting up 40 million, just I don't even know what to say with this. But anyway, like, if they're putting up the 40 million and it's 6.3 million, that leaves us at 3.7 million unaccounted for, and that's going to be like, oh, sorry, no open world game. And just this whole idea of Sony funding this and them going like, oh, but we got to get to 10 million and then we'll get the actual game. It's so beyond belief to me.
I wish, honestly, I think a lot of Kickstarters are doing this. I wish they're just more transparent about it. They're like, you know what? If you get to 10 million, that'll show that there's enough interest in this game that Sony will put up 100 million for it.
See, and I agree with that. And if it said that on there, 10 million stretch goal shows Sony enough interest to do this, that's fine with me. But saying like, if you guys don't give us the 10 million and the 10 million will make this an open world game.
Yeah. Well,
because nobody's saying the 10 million plus Sony's cut. It's 10 million gets you an open world game. It's
but
not.
It does get, but I understand at the same time, like as cool as that would be. I mean, you can't say that. Like Sony's not going to say, yeah, we'll put up 100 million. It's like we'll see. Like we'll talk about it. Like there's lawyers involved. Like there's a lot of paperwork involved.
And I agree with that. But again, it's just it's one of those things where it's too shady for me to like sit here and go. And you're coercing people and going, give us more money, and then you can have this because then we know they'll do it. I mean, there's still a chance that like. So if they got to $9.9 million, Sony's going to be like, oh, sorry, guys. You didn't hit the 10. No open world for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm sure if they got like I'm sure that because they got 6 million, I'm sure they're going to get like the 8 million or 10 or $9 million, whatever the other stretch goals were. But yeah, I think it would make more sense for them to be transparent. I don't think they're actually being nefarious. I just don't think they can say, like, you can say in a meeting to Sony, like, hey, Sony, we're Sony, we'll give you X million dollars if you make this amount of money because that shows there's enough interest. But it's something that's said in a meeting. It's not something you can just tell everybody. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly with that. But the fact that it just seems like you're trying to steal money from people.
I know,
you know
it
what
doesn't.
I mean?
No, because
yes, it does. Because if you're sitting there at $9 million and you go, guys, we have 5 days, 1 million, 10 million gets you the open world. When like really like 9 million is probably close enough for Sony to put up their money anyway.
Yeah.
That's where I'm getting like this whole like, because then you've got somebody who's like, well, I put up $100 already to get like the signed box. I guess I'll just put up another 20. You know what I mean? Because then you're going to get people who are thinking that way, and you're getting people who already have given you money to give you more money for something they might already get.
I mean, that is the idea, but at the same time, like whenever they go, I would say that would be more nefarious if they weren't getting anything because they were increasing their funds, but they do get more prizes or whatever with that stuff. So like at that point, you could see it as just like an additional purchase. Like, okay, I don't know if this one has like a lot of them have vinyl soundtracks.
Yep.
So to somebody, it's like, well, would I put up $20 extra if they were just asking for $20? No, but $20 extra and I get a vinyl, record now. Well, maybe now I'll do it. I think if they were just saying, give us extra money and you get nothing in return, then yeah, that'd probably be a bad idea. I kind of wish they would just eventually set this up as like, you're an investor and you get X percentage or something like that. Like that would make more sense. But
I'd be curious to see if it ever gets to that point. Cause that's something that I could see is just being like, having it essentially be like stock in a property. Like you're putting $20 in, which gets you a this percent cut. So every game that's released, you'll get 0.002 cents. We sell X number of copies. You know what I mean? Like that almost makes sense to me. But again, I don't know. Just this is my issue with Kickstarters in general, with like things that have support from major things and whatever example you want to use. If it's not truly like a 2-man team, just to me, like that's not what Kickstarter's for. And that was not the original intention of it. No, I know that's what it's turning into. But if like Sony put this up on Sony.com and was like, hey, we're going to crowdfund this. If you guys show enough interest in this, 5 million, we'll put up the money for the rest of the game to be developed. You hit 10 million, we'll put up the money for him to be able to have the opportunity to do an open world.
I think people would absolutely be willing to do that if they had cool pre-order bonuses stuff. Like here, if you put up, say, they're not going to need a fund Uncharted 5. Let's say Uncharted 5, we need funding for it. The example. Probably not a good example. Let's say Medieval 2 or something like that.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But you give like $5,000 and you get like a shield from Medieval.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, totally. I'm totally. Again, you're missing my point here. I am fine with every single thing about how this is run. I just want it on Sony's own private thing where Sony can be transparent and say, yes, 5 million is not going to make Shenmue 3. 5 million is going to allow us to give Yu Suzuki, right, is his name?
Yeah.
Is going to give us the chance to give Yu Suzuki 40 million. We'll be able to justify our 40 million by your 5 million. Almost like charities do the like, oh yeah, we'll match up to this much.
Oh, I get. Oh, yeah.
Just be transparent. That's all I want.
I think it's hard for people to understand how much games cost, though. I don't think people quite understand like a DLC costume in Batman actually costs $30,000 to make.
Yeah, and it totally does. And again, my issue isn't with the amount; it's with the transparency. That is my biggest issue with this.
I think Although I will say I know you don't like it, but I actually do like that these people are getting funding from Sony, and like I'm sure that Bloodstained one is also getting a lot of funding from someone else. I like it though because it actually guarantees they're actually now beholden to somebody to finish the product.
Yeah, as opposed to just these random people. And I agree with that. I just want that company to straight up say 5 million gets you Shenmue 3. 10 million gets you open world Shenmue 3 with our support as well.
I'll give you that. You could do something like let's say you had like different pre-orders. Like let's say pre-orders get you this amount. So you have like tier 1 pre-orders are worth 1 point, tier 2 pre-orders are worth 2 points, etc. It's like, and now when you get to 100 points, we'll make you, once everybody gets to 1,000 or 1,000,000 points, then we'll fund it or something like that.
Exactly. And that's what I want. I just want that company's logo on the page so people understand what they're paying for.
That's a good. All right. I can't disagree with that.
I win argument. All right. So before I lose argument, let's move on to our next news thing here.
You lose an argument. That's good. You make an argument. I agree with you.
So our next thing here, I'm super pumped about this. This is one of my all-time favorite video game franchises, and I love almost every entry into this series. And yeah, I'm talking about NHL 16, so now you can all stop listening. But anyway, they put up kind of their first gameplay reveal for some of the improvements with this. So at E3, they came out and said a bunch of that they were adding all the features back in that they took out for NHL 15, but I'm just excited about NHL 16. So they kind of talked about a couple things, and I know Doug doesn't play this at all.
I don't know anything about this.
I'm excited, so I want to talk about it.
My only question, though, is whatever you're about to say, does it get back to NHL 2013 levels of content?
They already announced that.
Oh, they did. So they're doing it.
That was their E3 thing. Was we're putting the content back in.
Oh.
This is their yearly gameplay tweaks.
Mm.
So like this is essentially like rebalancing a fighting game, where it's like if you're really paying attention, you'll notice it.
Yeah.
But it's not like a on the box, the on the box thing. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah. This is like the hardcore tweaks that you would care about, and maybe Brian, who was on our last podcast, would care about.
Yeah, exactly. For people who play this, it's not going to be like a huge selling point. But anyway, they kind of announced some changes with skating this year, and every year these games normally tend to have kind of like a focus. Like I think last year was fighting and physics engines were kind of the big thing that they tried to push. But this year they announced that they really worked on the skating. So what they added is like a strafe, so like a sidestep. So in previous games, like if you were going to turn, you always skated, kind of more or less in a straight line. This adds like a strafe, so you could kind of like walk on your skates. I don't know if have you ever ice skated before?
I have ice skated before. I do things besides play video games. We just have a video game podcast. Doesn't mean I'm not an interesting person outside of this.
There are people who haven't ice skated, but you know how you can kind of walk on your skates, and obviously if you're really good, you can kind of sidestep and things.
Yeah.
They basically added in a strafing element so that you can kind of be a little bit more specific with your positioning when you're playing defense, like lining things up.
Is it something like Ratchet and Clank where I mean, that means they'd have to like completely change the controls, I imagine. Do you now hold a button in order to do that strafe? So like hold down R2 to strafe left instead of going left, you know what I mean?
My guess is yes. They've always had like a button where you can kind of like specifically control things more. Like when you're on defense, it flips you around so you're back skating and things like that. So my assumption would be just while you're holding that button. Because before you would back skate and you would either glide left or right.
Yeah.
So my guess is now there's just like another button you can hold down to go left or right. But
okay. Is this a big change? Is this something that you've wanted or no?
With these, it's never something that you want. It's more of something that you're like, oh, that's cool. It just makes it like another thing that you would see people actually do that you can now do in the game. If that
Oh,
makes
okay, I
sense.
got you.
Like there's an element of like watching a hockey game going like, I can do that in this. I can do that. Oh, I still can't quite make that specific move in the game.
Oh, okay. So does this potentially, I mean, if you're saying they're adding back all this extra stuff, plus they're doing these small little tweaks, like, is this going to be like the best NHL game ever in your, like, are you really, really excited for this?
I'm really, really excited for everyone.
But I mean, we should talk a little about NHL 15. And you were kind of like, this game is good, but it has like nothing in it, and I don't like it, and da 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 da.
Well, for NHL 16, I can safely say if they just said we added all the features back in, I would buy that
Hmm.
because NHL 15 did have a solid gameplay thing, but it's just little tweaks to make things just run more smooth and just to change things up. And every time it changes how games are, how the game plays. A few years ago, they added like I think they called it like a hustle button where your player could like for a while would skate faster, like if you really need to get back on defense.
Oh, okay.
It's just changing things like that. Like one year they added, a new deke system where you had more control of the puck. 2 years ago they added a boarding thing where you could actually hold people up on the boards like you'd see in hockey, whereas
So
before you either
are
just
these
ran
all
into.
added together? Because I know when you talk about Madden, sometimes they'll put a new feature and then take it out. But have these all been like pretty consistent, like adding on, adding on, adding on, or they do stuff they pull it out like, okay, that didn't really work, we'll do something.
I think they kind of reevaluate every year because even Madden, there's only one or two things I can pick out that have like completely disappeared. It's more just like adding on, and it's every year adding an extra element of that. This is what you would actually have the ability to do if you were playing this game.
Yeah, this is one of those things I feel like people don't really appreciate with sports games. Even I don't like sports games. I don't really watch a lot of sports. But when I think about it, like these games, like they'll still get an 8 out of 10 or whatever, but it could still be the best NHL like ever made.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean? But it's still going to be it's like, oh well, it's not the same as last year. But it's like an evolutionary thing. I think that is kind of interesting that like NHL 2015 is probably in theory, much much better than 2010.
yes. And if you go back and you play these, I mean, even year to year,
Mhm.
I struggle, and I've tried it a few times just out of curiosity. I struggle to go back even a year with some of these changes. Now, not all of
Yeah.
them are game changing, but there have been years where like I've been like playing one, and then I'll go hang out with somebody like, oh yeah, let's play NHL, and they'll be like, oh, I just got last year's, like, okay, whatever, we'll play that, and I'll just like instantly be like fumbling with the controls. He'll be like, oh crap, I can't do this now. Okay, how did I do that before?
Is it worse or is it different when you go back?
It feels worse just because again, it's adding that extra element of control most of the time.
Hmm.
Where like, I mean, before they added in the boarding system, it was just you knock somebody over, you knock somebody into the boards, and then your player keeps going. Now, if I hold a button, I have the ability to either knock them down or pin them up there and try and get the puck away from them.
Oh, okay.
So it's just adding just different layers to it.
Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. It's not something I'm totally interested in, but I can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. To me, it's like fighting games. Like I like fighting games too, and like the super hardcore people can tell you the difference between Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Alpha. You know what I mean?
Turbo and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. There are people who can sit there and point those out, and then there's people who just can sit there and go, it's Street Fighter again. Why the hell is there a fourth Street Fighter 2?
Yeah, and they seem like massive changes to the hardcore audience, but to like most people who probably review these games, like, it's the same game I played last time, but they just don't feel that different. So
Exactly. It
yeah,
feels it just looks like, oh yeah, I think they changed the menu system.
yeah,
But
that's
when
all
you're
I would
actually
think.
playing, yeah. All right. But anyway, that was my. I need to talk about sports games because
I
sports
think
games
that's
are
interesting.
amazing.
I always find this stuff interesting because I know nothing about it.
And I think you say that line after every time we talk about sports
Well,
games.
because I do.
And have you played a sports game since then?
Hell no. I played Rocket League, which we
There you go.
determined was
That
a sports
counts.
game.
All right. So last couple news items here. I think these are a little bit quicker.
Mhm.
Prototype had a very sneaky stealth HD question mark re-release on Xbox One and PS4 this past week.
Oh God, you sound like one of those YouTube personalities. Like, excuse me, developer of Prototype, this is not acceptable. No, but it's not acceptable.
I just mean in terms of like they didn't say anything, and like I think it was a good day or two where people were like, "Is this an HD remaster? Is this just the same game? Is this the PC version? What is this?" Because
Yeah.
they literally said nothing about this, and it just showed up, and I think like every news story I saw was prototypes on the Xbox One store right now. Not sure what that's about.
Yeah, I think this is like I think we're just not used to it anymore. But this is just like shovelware. Like we're just not used to shovelware anymore. It's not like shovelware kind of disappeared when budgets got like way too expensive to make cheap, crappy games.
Yeah,
So I think this is just oh crap, we have this license sitting around. Prototype 2 didn't make a lot of money. Prototype 1 was kind of a fluke because people really like that one. But
If we just throw them up here, we can probably make an extra few thousand, maybe, extra 100,000 or 200,000, and call it
yeah,
good.
I kind of hope that they're not like that they're like, maybe this will get Prototype 3. I really hope this is not trying to figure out interest in Prototype 3. Or maybe I am, and we'll just never see a Prototype 3 because I don't think anybody's really interested in this. I feel like people are getting like tricked into buying this.
And that's almost what it seems like. And I feel like that's probably why there was no announcement, because they probably got a lot of sales just out of like, oh shit, did they remaster this? From there's a good audience for at least Prototype 1 that really liked that game.
Yeah.
And the idea of an HD re-release for some people for certain games just is huge. So I'm sure they got some money from this, but I don't know. The whole thing seems kind of sneaky and like, I don't know.
It seems like a business decision. I like Destructoid's title. Prototype ports run like shit and aren't remastered. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it was. It was like, because at this point, if you see a game on a next-gen console, you're assuming at least a remaster. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
For
I
the
would expect
most
at least like a FPS bump and like 1080p.
Yeah, and this really, I don't even think got those. Like I think it still runs at like 20 frames per second on the Xbox One and PS4. I think.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. Facebook page where he's asked if the bundle is upscaled or rendered at. Upscaled just means like it actually runs at 720, but it'll output to your TV at 1080, so it'll be a little bit blurry when they blow up the picture.
Yeah.
And he just said, and that's what he said. Or is it rendered 1080p where it's like actually has like that many pixels to begin with, and so you get a clearer image. And that's when he says the 1080p boost. Like that is hilarious. I didn't get, because you told me about that before. I was like, I don't get what you're talking about. Now that I'm reading, I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, it seems like the whole thing just seems really sketchy. Like we didn't really want to do this, but corporate made us do this.
Yeah. I think somebody's just trying to make a quick buck on a kind of a failed franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think many people are going to go out there and buy this anyway. Actually, I think another pretty shitty port was Saints Row 4. Actually, Saints Row 4, when I was playing at least, had a lot of glitches, and I understand that the game is set in a glitchy universe, but there were some weird glitches when I was playing it.
Yeah, there were a few, but I don't know.
I had it like constantly, like textures wouldn't line up, and like they like float around, or like cinematics wouldn't work quite right. I was like, that was. I
did have the cinematic problem on several parts in that game.
Okay, you did, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like it's not. I don't like these kind of half-ass ports, but Saints Row gets away with it because like, well, it's a half-ass port, but we'll give you all the DLC and we'll give you a bunch of extras. Like, okay, fine.
You made up for it.
Yeah.
So the last thing, and this is actually I'm really excited about, they announced a Never Alone DLC pack, which seems weird to me because I feel like most kind of smaller indie games like this don't get a quote-unquote DLC pack, so to speak. So
yeah,
I'm kind of excited about this. So it's called Foxtales.
Mm-hmm.
It actually comes out pretty much next week on July 28th.
Oh, seriously?
It's like this month still. So, and it's basically just kind of another story set in that same universe. And this one takes place during springtime, but it looks like you're still the little girl and the fox just kind of walking through Alaska, which I'm totally cool with.
I hope they have documentaries. I didn't see any documentaries in that trailer.
I forgot. That was your. Did you even finish the game, or did you just watch the documentary?
I just watched the documentaries and I got bored with the game. I didn't like this game very much. I understand. I should have liked it. I don't know. It just didn't click with me. I just really liked the documentaries. I thought it was a good documentary series with like kind of an annoying way to have to unlock a documentary series. It's not annoying. That's a lot. That's really cruel. That's mean. But there's a lot of heart in that game. It just didn't really click with me. I think that's what it was. So I would be more excited about this if they're like, oh, and with brand new documentaries where they talk about springtime in this culture. Like that would be cool. But I didn't see a single tribes person being interviewed. So I'm a little hesitant.
In the minute and 10-second trailer or so or whatever.
But I think that was a major part of that game. Like to me, that to me was what made that game special, was that these really, really, really well done documentaries that are way, way better done than like any, normal indie game has any right to be.
Yeah.
But
I'll agree with that. I think that was definitely kind of a selling point for the game. But to me, I enjoyed that game, and it was, going back to what we saw before, or what we were talking about before, it is kind of one of those games where there's long stretches where there's not much to do, and that kind of elevated the point where there was something to do, and just kind of really helped sell that point. So
see, that's where I got lost in that one, because I thought that's where I got bored. That's that weird balance you have to make, and that's why we were talking earlier. Devs don't really like to do that.
Yeah, but I'm excited for it. I don't know. I don't think there was a price announced with it. My guess would be probably $10. That seems to be kind of the going rate. But yeah, I'm excited for that. So hopefully,
are you gonna buy that day one?
I don't
I'm
know.
finding money leaves my pocket real quick if it's $10. Like,
Yeah, if it was $5, it'd be instantly.
yeah.
But I don't know, like $5 and under is pretty much my screw it number. Once it gets more than $5, there's like at least a little bit of thought put into it.
hmm
But I don't know. I'm sure I'll get it at some point. I don't know if it'll be day one or I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
But that'll do it for episode 21 of the Darksliders podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. Of course, you can follow us on YouTube, iTunes, anywhere else, or subscribe or whatever that little button happens to say on the site that you're listening to. But otherwise, we're on Twitter, Darksliders_pod. We will see you next time.
Bye.